Hello. I'd like to begin by thanking you all for taking the time to sit in on our pitch. And in the spirit of what we're talking about today, I'd like to take a moment of silence in the name of the Lord. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our first idea. 3 floors.
So this is our secondary idea. This isn't the one that we're going to be doing, but it comes off the biblical reference of the parables of the talents. It was the story of the master going off on a journey and leaving with his 3 servants bags of gold. One had 5 bags of gold, the other had 3 bags of gold, and the last one had 1 small bag of gold. And when he comes back, he sees that the servants, the first 2, have doubled theirs to 10 bags and 6 bags, whereas the last one has only buried his and just left it there. And then he praises the first 2 servants and goes against the last one, evicts him because he was given something that he should have expanded upon, but he didn't. So what we've done is we brought that into a more modern day example, and we've set it into a residence home where we have a landlord who is going off on holiday, and he has left his 3 main residents 3 floors. One has a penthouse floor, the top of the main one, which is the fanciest. The second has the second floor, which is the more standard one, and the last has the worst floor. And obviously when he comes back, the first 2 have got residents in and redecorated, whereas the last person has locked his up because it got vandalised, and obviously he's evicted due to his failure to do the job. Which is that one? So our first key scene is going to be the establishing scene of the entire film, where we see the landlord going up to each of the people's houses or apartments and bringing them out so they can talk about what they're going to do. This is quite an important scene because it's going to show the characters' different emotions to what's going on. We'll see the first character, the first resident even, he's a lot more excited when the landlord appears, same with the second one, whereas the third resident is less happy to see him because he knows he's the least effort giving, so that's why he's given the least of the floors, and he's just less enthusiastic than the other 2. Our second key scene is going to be our landlord leaving, so he's going to leave off and we're going to have our 3 residents go off and get all the stuff that they're going to have to redecorate and redo all their floors up, and we're going to see him leave off. And then finally, obviously, when he returns, we're going to see the works that all the residents have completed, whether they've gotten in new residents and redecorated, and we're going to see how he praises the first 2, and then the last one is not praised. He sees that he's not done anything with what he's been given, and he's evicted out.
Right, so next we've got our characters. So we have 4 characters in this whole film. The landlord is kind of the master figure from the original story. He's 56. He's quite a fair person, he believes in hard work, and if someone needs help, he's willing to help them. The resident number 1, he lives on the top floor, he's 25 years old, he's kind of entrepreneur, he's young but he's successful. He also believes in hard work, so that if you work hard at something, you'll be quite fruitful in that. The resident 2, he's 19, he's a student, so he's still studying, he's in the second floor, so he can afford that accommodation quite nicely. But he also wants to start up a business like his neighbour on the first floor. Then resident 3, he's 21, he's not as hardworking or anything like the other 2 residents, he's quite lazy, he doesn't really believe in hard work or anything like that, and whatever he does for himself and for his own gains really. So kind of our first state, the state of equilibrium is when the landlord is at home. This is where everything's running nicely. The lazy guy is still lazy, but the other 2, they're quite well set out. He's still working on his business, and the other guy's still studying. Disruption. This is when the landlord leaves, and so the recognition of that disruption is when the tenants set out and they begin to work on their floors the 2 begin to work out on their floors to make them nice, and the other one doesn't do anything. The attempt at repair is when the first 2 residents, they get new residents coming in. This is due to their improvements to their floors, and then the new equilibrium is when the landlord returns. He rewards the 2 residents for doing good things to their floors, and then he evicts the last one who's done nothing.
So, form and content. With the codes and conventions for our short film, we're going for a sort of coming-of-age film. And basically what this means is that what's going to happen across the course of the film is we're going to see a development of each of the characters as we get to know them and we see them grow, except the third character, which doesn't really change at all, and that's why he gets evicted at the end of the film. So for our visual style, we're going for a lot of big city shots, and then interior, we're going to see each of the 3 floors with one of the main types of angle that we're going for is the camera like going down through the floors, so that we can see the contrast between each level of the building.
So the target audience, we're going to be going for anybody who is 12 and up, but we'll also be mainly focusing on young adults of 18 to 30. We are trying to do this because we think that as the story is, of course, a coming-of-age story, if they are a young adult or a teenager, they can relate more heavily to it and also call on past experiences, so it has a much heavier relation to the actual film. So the possible constraints we are going to have are residents moving in, decorating, and the location. So when the residents are moving in, this could be a problem because we'd need lots of extras, and to hit a realism in this scene, we'd also need to include things like moving vans and plenty of things that people have when they're moving in, such as boxes, and that'll take a lot of props and a lot of effort. Decorating would also be another difficult thing to shoot during the film. One of the main parts of the film is when the residents are improving what they've got and decorating the apartments and floors they have. And this will be extremely difficult to film because we can't actually go to a place and decorate it without permission, and to get permission for firstly a apartment building is difficult, but to get permission to redecorate is even more difficult. So that's also a location as well, because it would just be difficult to get a building and then, of course, decorate it. So moving on to the opportunities, of course, we're looking at the opportunities that we have whilst the constraints are going off. So residents moving in. Number one that we're going to have is extras, of course. We could use family members and friends for this role, and also hiring out a van is perfectly easy to do, and you can also do it quite cheaply. What we could do for the boxes and the other props needed in the film, we could just go through people's cardboard recycling and tell them to bring in boxes they have at home. And we don't need to necessarily fill them out. As long as we have the boxes, we can create the illusion of somebody moving in. So the decorating, the way we can get around the decorating is by essentially doing a montage. We can give the illusion of change without actually changing anything. And location, the best way to do it would be like Hollywood and fake it. So one way we could do that is we could use places that you could pass off as an apartment, but of course not actually apartment. We could essentially just use a bunch of different locations that could get passed off as an apartment and then use effects to help.
So this is the first 2 shots of our storyboard. The movie begins with the landlord packing his bags, and then he zips them up, and we see his feet walking along the corridor as he goes to exit the building.
And so the next 2 are following on from that shot of him walking out of the building. It's quite fast, and we can hear that sound of the wheels of the suitcase then like turning, and his footsteps walking through this apartment building. And the next shot is one of the residents. He opens his door to see his landlord leaving, and the camera tracks in kind of to show the emotion in his face, like what is he thinking? And he goes, well, Joe or Josh will tell you.
This is the next bit after the landlord has left. We have the 3 elevators that are in the building, and this is to represent. It's sort of a bit of a sort of far-fetched one, but each elevator on each floor is meant to represent sort of the status of each of the residents. So the one on the bottom floor, of course, would probably be dirtier than the one that is, of course, on the top floor with the resident who achieved and received the most.
And finally, we have our residents coming together. You can see them in the back there, they're all together in a group. They've come to the third resident who's lazing around. Obviously, he doesn't care that the landlord's gone, but they're all together saying, we all need a plan for what we're going to do, and it goes off then to lead into the main montage of then decorating, creating the new houses and getting in the new residents. And obviously we see our last resident, he ends this scene by slamming the door to represent how he doesn't care, and we don't see much of him in the montage, more of him just lazing around, not doing much. The feasibility of our idea, we see that it may have a bit of trouble once again finding the location. That is going to be our biggest problem with this, and also again extras, but overall it could be a nice idea to come together if we do get it, and there are possibilities. Obviously there are places in Swindon, or places that we can go to that we can nicely make the movie to make it look as if it was real, and redecorate. We can, with the movie effects again, have it so that it could be feasible to do, but it might be a bit of a struggle.
Yeah, so this adaptation is quite a light-hearted kind of idea. It's the story of growth. The light-heartedness will be reflected in the colour grading. I'm going to use some bright colours, so when they're painting, they're redecorating the thing, I'm going to use lighter colours to redecorate and make these hallways and rooms look really nice. So the visual, it's not complicated at all, and there will be no difficult effects that are consuming the film.
Lastly, I'd like to talk about the feasibility of the film in the market. There are plenty of films that use the idea of characters progressing throughout the movie to become a better version of themselves, and so this is just taking that and putting it in the centre of the film's idea, and so there's plenty of market out there for this film to succeed.
So what we'll do is we'll keep the questions to for your primary idea.
Okay, so on with our primary idea, which is called Two Sons, and
Do you want to?
okay,
Sorry.
we can go to the
Bit
next
trigger
slide.
happy.
That's fine. We can go to the next slide.
So yeah, our next story, this is our main one. This is called Two Sons, and this is of the parable of the prodigal son, or the lost son. This is about a family, and one of the sons decides that he wants to go off and take his inheritance money his father gives to him to go and live off in the city, rather than helping out with the family business with him and his other brother, and obviously the father's other son. And he goes off into the city, lives an eccentric life, but then he slowly but surely runs out of money, as the people around him, he realised, they're not there to be with him, they're because he's with money so they can take it from him to just have a bit of fun, and eventually he just goes lower and lower, losing more and more until he gets into the gutter. He's scraping for money around, he realises he's at the bottom, so he has to go back to his father, gain the confidence to go back. But when he gets there, his father invites him back with like open arms, and obviously the other son is very confused. He's like, he abandoned us, why is he allowed back in? But the father says, rejoice, he's back, he's not, he's been saved, it's a miracle that he's back. So the story shows that even when you go against them, you should always love the ones that are truly there for you, even if at times they stray away. And for the other son, he should always stick to those that loved him, his family, rather than his fake friends that were there for his money. And once again, we're going to have it into a more modern adaptation. We're going to have it two sons, they're together, and their father passes away, and when they pass away, they get inherited the farm that their father has worked on all their life, and a large amount of inheritance money. So we have our two sons, Jake and Ben, and Jake finds out about the inheritance money and instantly runs off and lives off another life in the big city. He goes off partying with new mates. He can't be bothered to go work in the farm and grow big. He's just like living for the moment. I'm going to go out, I'm going to party, it's going to be fun. And then we see Ben stuck back at the farm, working by himself. He's struggling to get by as well because there's no one else there helping for him. And then we go back to seeing Jake. He's got too big into the party scene. We see that he started to get into the bad crowd, and it's affecting him badly until finally we see that it gets too much for him and he ends up hospitalised due to drug overdose from partying. So when he gets into the hospital, he looks around him and he sees that no one's there, but of course he gets the confidence, grows himself back up from being weak at the bottom. He goes back to his brother, and his brother accepts him back with open arms as well. And we see them working on the farm together. So yeah, the key scenes of this is we're going to start at the funeral or wake of the father, obviously, and we're going to have the two brothers. We see that they're mourning, but then it's going to instantly change when they're shown the will and the inheritance that they get. We see that Jake, obviously, as soon as he finds out about the inheritance that he rises up, like his attitude gets a lot better, even though the passing of his father, he knows, oh, I can use this money for like great fun things to do. Whereas Ben, he sees it more as an honour. He takes on his father's responsibilities and his father's job in honour and wants to carry on his life goal pretty much and carry on his business. So that seems very important because it shows us the split between the two characters. The other key scene is halfway through the point. We see that Jake is in the city. He's now out partying every night, and he's slowly getting in the wrong crowd until finally he starts to get too far into it. We see that he's out one night. He's out of money, but he's still going out, and he gets to one night where he gets all too much, and he falls to the ground. He gets hospitalised. And our final key scene is we're going to have Jake this time in the hospital, and he's looking around, seeing who there is to look after him and care for him, and there's no one there, and he's shocked. He's like, why is there no one here for me? But then in front of him comes Ben, his brother, and he's like, after all of that, you're still there to love me. So he takes that on, and it's like, I'll come back and work on the farm. And it shows that the main story, the main moral of the story is that though he strayed away, the two love each other and always stay with the characters and stay with the people that love you.
Right, so we have two main characters in this film. We got Ben and Jake, and they're both the two brothers or the two sons from their father that has died. So they're both 18, but they're both kind of very different people. So Jake likes to party. He's kind of sick of this farm that he's been on all his life, and he wants to get out. And he sees his father's inheritance and his father's death as a way to get out, as kind of dark as that seems. And then Ben is kind of hardworking. He takes on the honour of running his dad's farm, thinks that he needs to keep on his dad's name and his family's business from doing this. So he puts his half of the inheritance towards running his farm and keeping it going, whereas Jake blows it all on alcohol and drugs and partying. So Ben's kind of simpler, whereas Jake is more kind of complex. Then we got form. So we got Todorov, the state of equilibrium. This is kind of before the film starts, is where his father's still alive, and they're both the brothers. They're still on the farm. They're still quite happy, although Jake still wants to leave. A disruption. This will be when the father dies. The inheritance has been split between the two brothers, and they kind of begin their separate journeys. The recognition. This is when Jake is in hospital. He's overdosed. He has no friends left. At this point, he realised that he's made this mistake, and the repair is that Jake goes back to his brother, and his brother at this point accepts him back into his farm and back into his life because he knows that he needs him. And Jake admits to his brother that he's done wrong. And then the new equilibrium is where they're both working on this farm together, like they used to when their father was there, but they're both working for this family business to make sure it prospers. And so our form and content is, this one's also a coming of age, coming of age story. So we've put the teen film kind of bit in there because the main codes and conventions of a teen film are there parties, there's alcohol, there's drugs, there's loads of people crammed into one room, they're all having a good time. We've got these bright lights from a party, and a coming of age thing, the coming of age story distinctly has these scenes where there is a traumatic experience. So in this case, it's losing their father, and this causes them both to change, either to step up, or in Jake's case, he falls back down into this partying. What visuals now? Jeremy?
So for the visuals of the film, we're essentially going for a lot of contrast between the two characters because that's what we want to show, that's the main goal. So on the farm, on those scenes we're going to use a lot of vivid colours, and in the party scenes we're going to use a lot of darker colours to show sort of like the imagery of the drugs and the alcohol and that it's bad. And also, we're going for some shots where we have like a split screen type of thing to directly contrast what the two characters are doing at the same time. And they're going to sort of blend together. So one of the shots we're having is like a row of like vegetables at the farm, and the camera's going to be tracking along that, and then the row of vegetables is going to sort of like fade, and it's going to change to the other scene what the brother's doing, and the row is going to turn into like a line of cocaine or something like that, to give like that real contrast. For the audio wise, obviously same thing, contrast with the farm. We're having a lot of peaceful noises and a lot of loud, bangy party sort of noises on the party scenes.
So target audience for our film is definitely going to be 15 plus, due to the drug references and the partying scenes being messy. Like, it's probably the best way I can put it. But we'll also go all the way up to probably 25, 30 years old. This is yet again because similar to the last one idea we just pitched. It will be mainly focusing on the idea of a character progressing and a coming of age sort of story. So we have the characters at the beginning, and they both change to become better people. So the possible constraints are party scenes, music, and the locations. So the party scenes could be difficult to film due to the amount of people needed, and also the style of the parties with the colourful lights, the smoke in the atmosphere, and also how we're going to film it with the drugs. Secondly, the music, we will need to use royalty-free music because any chance music or music that is copyrighted could land us in trouble. So the music will need to be royalty-free or produced by us. And finally, locations can be difficult. We could fake many of the party scenes for places in college, or we could generally go out and ask locations out and around town and see if we could actually use their area to film. So, opportunities for the party scene. This could allow us to learn a lot of things about setting a scene, the atmosphere, and how to shoot a scene to make it seem like there are more people there than there actually are. Music. The best and simplest way to overcome the music law, copyright laws is to use royalty-free music, as I've mentioned previously. And locations. We could write to businesses and areas that we could use, like, for example, the Wyvern or any club in town, and see if we could use the locations. If we can't, though, we could just fake it, as I've again mentioned before, and this could teach us valuable lessons in how to set a scene and how to produce something that is not real.
So for our further development of the film, essentially what our plan was is to make a mobile game of the film, because the main reason. Oh wait, if you just go on to the next slide, Harry. The main reason for that is because mobile phones are obviously the most accessible things on the market. It's the fact that more people have access to mobile phones than they do to toilets. So obviously that means that we're going to have a massive market to reach out to if we make a mobile game. Furthermore, because we have quite a low budget for this film and anything else we do, essentially, we're going to have a we're going to have a low budget, so obviously when you're making something like a mobile game, it's going to cost a lot less than to, say, make an Xbox game or something like that. So what the game would be about is pretty much just a game of the movie. Yeah, so basically what would happen is it's like a multi-choice game, you know, like Telltale games, if you've seen those before. So like your decisions impact what happens, which relates back to like the main themes of the story. Okay, so for the storyboard, we start off, obviously, as Joe mentioned earlier, at the funeral. And we have sort of like a funeral montage type thing, where we then see like the last will of the father, like being signed, and it shows who the money's being distributed to, and all of that. After that, we cut to several months later, once they receive the money, and they sort of get into an argument about it because obviously one brother wants to do one thing and he's talking about what he's going to do with all of his cash, and the other one sort of gets offended by this because he's like, oh, why are you talking about what you're going to do with the money? Don't you have any respect for that? And then it ends off with one brother storming out of a house in like a rage and going to the city, and that's what sort of flicks off this like avalanche of just going downhill for him.
Right, and then next we kind of go into this split scene kind of montage thing. So first we kind of got the barn split with a house party. So you see them both going. So you see both brothers going in. Ben will be going into the barn, and then Jake will be going into the party. And then next we see it'll be Ben and Jake again, but one's holding a shovel in one hand, and it'll be split down the middle, and it'll be the other brother, but one's holding a can of beer. That kind of shows the split between the two brothers and how one's gone off to spend the money one way and how the others stayed to look after the business. And then this kind of goes. The next scene is going to be Jake buying some drugs, and then kind of it goes downhill from there. So we still got a split scene kind of montage thing. So we got Jake, he's kind of what do you call it? I need words now. He's oh god. No, he's like shocked. He's having a bad trip from these drugs. So he's put his hands to his head. He's sweating. He's wiping away his sweat. And then it cuts to his next one where his brother's out in the field. He's hot. He's sweaty from doing his work. So he wipes his head as well. And then he walks away. Come to the next one.
So here's mine. Mine is very similar to Harry's. This is sort of like the next stage of that. He takes more drugs, and then he's outside the club taking the drugs, and then he goes back in, and then this is when he begins getting the flashbacks, and he begins getting flashbacks, sort of distorted flashbacks of what we've previously seen in the film. So, of course, his father's funeral, him and Ben having the argument, and then more drugs arrive, and he takes more. And then he eventually gets his worst sort of trip and flashback where he sees his father in a field turning away from him.
And then finally, after all the flashbacks, we come back to him in the party, and he's just like trying to get away from it. He's like, just ignore it all. So we see him doing even more drugs, and we have him partying again until we finally have the last scene where it comes up. He's reached his peak point, but it's gotten too much for him, so we're going to have it very close-up shots, so we don't see everything that's going on around him. It's very like closed in. It's quite a hard scene, but that's the reason for it, because it can show you what he's feeling like right now, where everything's kind of just rushed. So we'll finally have him. We'll have a girl in front of him, put one last pill in her mouth, and then we'll go right into his eye. We'll see that his eye's dilated. Everything's just all messed up. He's moving around, and then we finally see him slowly start to fall back, and as this happens we'll hear a heartbeat start raising faster and faster until it finally hits its peak point, and it will cut out and turn into a flat line, and we'll have a pure black screen for around 3 seconds, and then it will go into him waking up in the hospital. So the feasibility, there are possible constraints and opportunities for this. So the main idea that we were going on is the split screen idea. It would be very good to do and would look good, but it could also be difficult to get in the movie, if you understand what we mean. So having it split up perfectly so that it perfectly fits in, we're going to have to find the perfect 2 locations, and it's already hard getting locations for the main filming, but finding 2 that fit perfectly together for perfect scenes to make it look like aesthetically pleasing. But overall, I reckon that we could get it to come out quite nicely with a split idea, because it's a very nice way of flowing the movie through to move it on but still have both sides of it.
Yeah, the whole film is all doable. There's nothing that's kind of extremely difficult that we can't create. The main problem is with the framing of these shots, we have to get them completely clean, and we have to make sure they look great and they match up completely. The locations themselves...
Sorry, Harry, how are you going to do that?
Or how we do the framing.
So one of the possible ways we've thought about doing the framing is by filming in portrait for and then for the split scenes, and then placing them side by side. And when you crop in a small amount, you can fill a 2:35 to 1 aspect ratio perfectly with the two shots that are filmed in portrait.
Also, for getting the shots lined up, we're also going to have to figure out some angles so that when we're doing the bit where we have one line down the middle and each scene sort of cuts into each other seamlessly,